Hey guys, in this video I explore some cheaper alternatives to things like Oura and Whoop for finding out how hard you should train on a given day. These wearables mainly rely on heart rate variability, HRV for short, to produce a recovery or readiness score. In a recent Andrew Huberman podcast, he mentioned some cheaper alternatives to HRV, namely grip strength and CO2 tolerance. I spent 90 days tracking both to see how they compare to my wearable data. Here's how I got on. Heart rate variability is something I've really learned to appreciate in recent years. What's being measured is the variation in timing between your heartbeats, and it's actually a higher score that means that your body is more prepared for exercise that day. First, I'm going to map out what my HRV looked like across the 90 days, then we can see how the new variables measure up. So the main driver of HRV is activity level, which I've annotated on the graph. You can hopefully see a trend for average HRV to rise during my taper, a taper being a deliberate reduction in training load with the aim of peaking for competition. Since I was already fresh from my competition, the 10-day break actually meant losing some fitness and then gaining it back during the conditioning phase of my outdoor season. While HRV is a large component of Whoop's recovery score, it does capture other things like quality and duration of sleep. So here's a plot of my HRV against my recovery score. The correlation between these two, where 1 is perfect and 0 is no relationship at all, is 0.92, which is very strong. I'm going to be using my Whoop recovery score when comparing grip strength and CO2 tolerance. Dr. Huberman said that grip strength measures your ability to use your upper motor neurons to control your lower motor neurons and generate isolated force. In English, more than a 10% reduction from your own personal baseline indicates that your nervous system is not fully recovered. You might want to reduce your training load that day or even push your workout by a day and have an additional day of recovery. I've highlighted those days in red on this graph. So I'm taking the highest grip score for each day. These were all measured within 10 minutes of waking up, and the darker line is my Whoop recovery score. There is next to no correlation here with an R score of 0.03, meaning my grip strength tells me absolutely nothing about my recovery score. There was also no common theme across the days where I had a weaker grip. What I found interesting is that removing wallpaper with a scraper in the final week seemed to have an effect on just my dominant hand. So rather than grip strength reflecting my overall ability for my body to produce force, it seems to be quite susceptible to localized fatigue. Next up is CO2 tolerance, and again this is measured first thing on waking up. The testing protocol involves 4 deep breaths in through the nose, slowly out through the mouth, then a 5th breath in through the nose. You start the timer and you exhale as slowly as possible through the mouth. The timer stops when you're no longer able to breathe air out. You're not timing when you next need to take a breath in. For this test, you're measuring how well you can use your breathing muscles to release air in a slow and controlled manner, which is said to be a good indicator of recovery. The first few days I did this lying on my back, but I kept needing to swallow halfway through, which seemed to be compromising my results. So I restarted the 90 days in a sort of child's pose position, and this was much better. So here are my results across the 90 days plotted against Whoop recovery. The red dots now represent a 20% reduction from baseline, which is indicative of insufficient recovery. For the first 3 weeks, I actually thought this was a huge waste of time. I was averaging about 67 seconds and not seeing any scores that were 20% below my baseline, despite being in a heavy training block. It was only when I reduced my training load, it dawned on me that those first 3 weeks were pretty much all below my baseline. Looking at this graph, it feels like CO2 tolerance is able to pick up on recovery levels. There's a cluster of low scores during my heavy training, and my best scores came during the taper. Overall, I felt this was a worthwhile experiment, and it gave me the answers that I was looking for. By comparing everything to my Whoop recovery score, I might give the impression that I think it's some sort of gold standard. That is not the case. While I generally perform better on green days, which is Whoop recovery above 67%, it's by no means perfect. The cluster of low CO2 tolerance times during my heavy training block gives me confidence that it's capturing something worthwhile. I was feeling very run down in January, so it's fair to say I was consistently under-recovered, which Whoop didn't seem to pick up as clearly. If you're looking to track something that measures how ready you are to train that day, then I would say CO2 tolerance seems the most promising. In my experience, grip strength was too heavily influenced by the local fatigue of my forearm muscles to be of any use. I recommend tracking CO2 tolerance for an extended period of time like I've done, and making sure that you include some low volume weeks so you can see what scores you can get when you're fully fresh. I hope you found this useful. Please check out my videos, just watch all of them and subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching.